Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserloh.
All right, we welcome you back into the Four Tire Change. The NASCAR Cup Series playoffs have begun. Now, start off this by saying, apologize for the little bit of a makeshift setup today, but many of you who are in the area may know there is a hurricane approaching us in Southwest Louisiana. So us here at ESPN Southwest Louisiana, we're moved some things around to try and make this work for the week. But certainly want to make sure everybody stays safe out there. If you're in the path of tropical storm, or now I guess Hurricane Francine, that's going to be making landfall here in the next couple of days, just try to make sure to stay safe. And we are certainly doing our best over here to do the same. So with that being said, we'll still try and get through this pretty quickly here because the NASCAR playoffs began. It was an important race in Atlanta, and it was a really entertaining one at that. You know, going in, I think we knew when the Cup Series was announced that they were going to be having the first playoff race be at Atlanta, that changed some things. And, you know, I talked about this with Chris in our playoff preview, an opportunity for the cars who, you know, quote unquote, were in the playoffs due to luck or one win or whatever, where you go, well, those are going to be the first cars eliminated. Not necessarily, because if you go to Atlanta, you know, we know it's an equalizer. It's a drafting track. Everybody can, you know, run up front. And so that might shuffle some things around. And the rest of the makeup of this round, when you have Watkins Glen as the next race, you really have the ability for this to be a little bit wild. And you're going to finish it off at Bristol. So it is definitely one of the most wide open first rounds of the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs we've ever had. And that makes those playoff points all the more important. So we talked about that with Denny Hamlin, and we're going to get back to that in a minute. But the story of this race, essentially, look, the Penske team was unbelievably fast. Ryan Blaney and Austin Cindric really dominate the first two stages. They go 1-2 in stage one. They go 1-2 in stage two. They just flip who wins it and who comes in second. So 19 playoff points apiece for each of those Penske drivers. Just a massive start to the playoffs for those teams. Other drivers that were really strong. Daniel Suarez had a really nice run in this race, was up near the top 5, top 10 for the majority of it. Even had that little run in pit road and kind of overcame that. And look, it's coming down to the white flag, and Daniel Suarez is right there with a chance to win this race again, the same race that he won in February. That's the reason he's in the Cup Series playoffs. So all that was really fun to watch play out. You know, look, you had a Kyle Larson wreck that was pretty scary in this race. You know, fortunately, he got out pretty quick and seems to be okay, but that's massive for the playoff implications. Now, Kyle Larson, having done everything he did in the regular season, he should be okay. But we're going to get into where the playoff bubble is, and Larson's only plus 15 now. So all of a sudden, that massive, you know, big advantage he had built in over the course of the season, it shaved down a lot. It's not gone. He's still got a buffer because of how good he was, but he's not in this, you know, I can literally go out and do everything possible to win the race, not worry about points at Watkins Glen. No, like he's got to make sure he secures some stage points and a nice finish to take some of that pressure off going into the final race of the first round. So with all that being said, you know, you look at kind of the ebbs and flows of how this thing went, and there was a lot of moving and shaking throughout this race where you're going, man, think about if the results were right here, if this race ended. Look at who would be in and out of the playoffs on the cut line. You get down the stretch, and here comes Joey Logano. So we talk about the other two Penske cars. Not to say Logano wasn't a factor at all, but he had some things to overcome in this race, and he ends up front. You know, on that last run, that last lap, I thought to myself, Suarez didn't go with Chastain, right? Chastain gets a run up to the high side, his teammate behind him. And I thought maybe Suarez would go up and block. It ends up that Chastain gets loose and gets in the wall a little bit shortly thereafter. So as I was kind of looking back through it, I was like, maybe he did make the right call, and Suarez finishes second here, and that's massive for him. It's going to put him in a spot where he's got a really, really good chance to make it to the next round, especially considering going to Watkins Glen in the second round of this playoffs, and that's a place, you know, road courses at least, Suarez has had a lot of success at. But I thought maybe he could have went with Chastain and had a chance to win this. His teammate pushed him to victory. That's not how it went. He stays down with Bell. Chastain gets into the wall, and then you end up having the wreck coming into turn 4. Wouldn't have impacted this finish anyway, though. Joey Logano was going to win this race. So Logano wins it, stays out front. He has been so good at those tracks, and he does it yet again. Penske really just runs the day altogether. And Logano is now through to the second round of the playoffs, which, look, at different points in this season, you wondered whether or not Logano was going to be a factor at all. Now he gets a chance to kind of reset. Again, go for wins the rest of this round because he doesn't need points, which is valuable, especially when you consider Watkins Glen, the stage breaks. Like, Logano can kind of use those alternate strategies that some of these cars, like I mentioned, Larson might not be comfortable making sure they're on the right side of the cut line, getting those stage points. Logano doesn't have to worry about any of that. He can go for broke. He can go for those wins, which again, 5 extra playoff points in the next round and all the other rounds of the playoffs. So that is massive for him. All in all, when you look at the bubble, there's a handful of drivers that you feel are really safe, especially considering the road course is at least going to be less likely to lend itself to, accidents, drivers getting caught finishing in the back that usually have a lot of speed. We'll take a look at it here in just a moment. So look, as I look at it, going through my notes on this playoff bubble cut line, Blaney, Bell, Reddick, and Byron, all 30 or more points to the good. 45 for Blaney, 40 for Bell, 33 apiece for both Reddick and Byron. You feel like those cars, look, again, outside of an engine failure early in the race at Watkins Glen, and look, all 4 of those cars have been very good at road courses in the past. They all feel like they are pretty safe right now. 27 to the good for Bowman and Cindric, which is interesting. I think Cindric feels really good because we know he's very good at road courses. Bowman's been a little bit up and down there, but did a great job earning himself a lot of stage points and a nice finish. So he now feels really solid. I mean, you feel pretty good about those cars. Elliott at plus 24, again, really solid at road courses. Suarez at plus 22, really solid at road courses. Now, I guess at some point you say, well, look, if everybody in the playoffs are pretty good at road courses, which for the most part they are, then how much of an advantage is it? Maybe not. The point is that they have the point advantage, right? And Suarez at 22 is the last car that I think you feel really good about. Then it's Larson at plus 15. You feel okay with the number, but I think you feel better because it's Kyle Larson. And again, he is going to be in contention for a win, we would expect, at Watkins Glen. The entire idea, again, is to make it to where you don't have to go into that final round of the first round of the playoffs feeling like you need a great finish because of the unpredictability, especially at a place like Bristol. Here's the guys who are in some trouble. Denny Hamlin, plus 2. That penalty, which again was more of Toyota's fault than Denny's or Toyota Racing Development, whoever building the engines. Unfortunate. He's plus 2. He's got work to do, and we'll see how well he can run at Watkins Glen. He needs a good finish. Brad Keselowski is minus 1 because Ty Gibbs is plus 1. Those are 2 cars. Really, it's going to come down to who has a better finish in these next couple of races. Those 2 drivers, I feel really up in the air, right? Who's going to have a really good run? And we know Gibbs has some speed at these places. He's been really good there before. Keselowski, I think maybe a little bit less common for him to be running really well at these places, but he's got to if they're going to make it to the next round. Harrison Burton is minus 16. We don't feel great about him. I think he was the one you circled at the beginning and said, man, he's going to have to run good at Atlanta because we know he's had the least speed of anybody. He was last in points all year long. He got in because of a crazy win at Daytona. Martin Truex Jr. minus 19. The last season as a full-time driver, I know a lot of people are rooting for him. It's going to take something big. He doesn't have to win necessarily, but he has to run up front. He has to get stage points, and he has to finish well in both of these last 2 races if he's going to race his way in on points. And then lastly, Chase Briscoe minus 21. You do feel like, hey, he's had some speed at the road courses. Stewart-Haas as a whole, even though they're on their way out, they have been a little bit better down the stretch, but really feels like probably needs to win or close to it to get himself into the next round. So, look, I think there's so much still up in the air. I enjoyed the racing in Atlanta. I think it's going to get really dicey at Watkins Glen because these cars are going to be impatient when it comes to the points that they receive in this race. Let's see what happens, and then we'll go into the final week of the playoffs of the first round, really having things probably be wide open. I can't wait for it. Hopefully it's as exciting as it looks like it's going to be. Appreciate everybody for joining us. Again, if you're in the path of the tropical storm/hurricane Francine in the next few days here this week, please make sure you stay safe out there. We're hoping the best for everybody. And we will be back next week discussing that race at Watkins Glen. I'll give a race pick quickly. I'm going to go, I'm going to go Christopher Bell. I think one of the drivers who doesn't have a lot of pressure on, they're fairly comfortable with the cut line. I feel like that's who comes out of this race victorious. So give me C. Bell, a guy who's more than 20 points to the good, has been running really, really well, is always good in the playoffs. I'll take Christopher Bell at Watkins Glen. We'll be back next week to discuss it. We're signing out for now.